Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the second podcast of Global Entrepreneurship Week. The Northwest PA Innovation Beehive, along with Gannon SBDC, are pleased to present success stories. Today, we will be hearing from Jon Marsh of Steel Toe Consulting and Espo Wilcox of PA Mushroom Company. Your moderator for today's webinar is Jake Marsh, Industry Relations Coordinator at Penn State Behrend. I have a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. This webinar is being recorded. Should you have any questions for our panelists, please enter them into the chat or the QA box, as I will be monitoring that throughout the entire podcast. So without further ado, I would like to turn the podcast over to Jake. Jake, take it away, please.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Thank you very much for all the help with the event, all the events this week, in fact. So Kathy's our hero for GEW this year. So we owe a lot to her. Thank you very much. Our plan for today was to have a team of manufacturing entrepreneurs to join us to talk about entrepreneurship in manufacturing. But each and every one of them was super busy or had something come up, and that's entrepreneurship, right? So we're used to that. And so we pivoted a little bit to two industries that are somewhat related. And so we have Jon Marsh, who will introduce in a few minutes in the construction technology business. And we will have Espo join us as soon as he can. He's having some technical difficulties, but we'll have him on board in a bit. And he runs PA Mushroom Company out of Clarion. And Clarion, down in Clarion, he's growing mushrooms, and it's just a fascinating business. So I'm going to begin, and we're going to hear some good stories about how these individuals, formed their businesses, how they made the decisions that they made, and get a little bit of perspective from them and a little bit of advice as well. So Jon, if you could introduce yourself first and tell us about your business, how long you've been doing it, and who you serve and what you do.
Cool. So I'm Jonathan Marsh, and I'm the CEO of Steel Toe Consulting. I am what's called a construction technologist. And so the construction industry has lagged in technology behind manufacturing. And over the last decade, we've really made a push to try to build in a lot of the tech that you're seeing in other industries. And actually, because of, I'm going to call it because of imposter syndrome, we've actually overcorrected. So now in the construction industry, we're using augmented reality and reality capture and a lot of really cool tech far before the manufacturing side. And we're also, it's interesting, you were going to have a bunch of manufacturing startups, Jake. Part of what my business does as a consulting group is starts fabrication shops for people. So contractors pretty much across the United States are becoming manufacturing startups today. That's what they're doing. And that's part of what I do in my business. So my current business, I do software development. I do technology consulting. I also do 2 podcasts, and I'm a speaker nationally for construction organizations, the National Electrical Contractors of America, National Mechanical Contractors of America, Sheet Metal Contractors of America. So I speak at their events, mostly on business process and on technology process, and sort of how to build entrepreneurially within your business. So I came here out of a local business. I came here out of Spader. Spader is a contractor in Erie. They do mechanical contracting. They also have plumbing and service company, and I was their CTO. So I had started out as an engineer and had a decade in engineering, then moved over to contracting, helped them build a fab shop, which was really spearheaded actually by the people that construct in the field. So it was a really interesting situation, and then got really deep into tech. And at some point, Stanley Black & Decker said they wanted to start building out startups. So me and another gentleman, we said, hey, we got this great idea for you. We're going to come out there and build out infrastructure for bringing technology to the trades across the United States as a startup. And so me and a guy named Josh Bone did that. It was a really interesting situation trying to have the agility that you need as a startup to be successful within a larger business. So Stanley Black & Decker is a huge business. I think they own DeWalt and some of their other tools, but you might not know is they own Mac tools, they own Craftsman, they own hospital tracking equipment. They're a huge conglomerate. So they were trying to bring on startups to be a little bit more dynamic, a little bit more agile. And we kind of did that for about 6 months before we realized that it didn't have the resources that you need to be a good startup. It was basically a business that was so large that in order to get a domain name, which takes like 15 minutes, they were like 3 months in, they hadn't got a domain name. They were 6 months in, and we were still having trouble getting a website up. This is stuff that most startups do within, I don't know, the first 2 to 3 weeks of existence. So we realized that they really weren't at a point where they were willing to let go and have a startup work parallel. So at that point, I took the clients that I did have that were consulting clients, and with their blessing, I came back to Erie and I went to Radius, and I had the most interesting startup experience you can have, which is I have a bunch of clients who are paying me and I have no company. So I was reverse engineering a startup, which is not the situation in talking to them. Like most of the time, if you're a startup, like you're trying to get business, you've been planning your business out for years, you have a business plan, you have all of this stuff built. I had none of that, but what I had was clients that were paying me. So I moved to Erie. I leaned on Penn State and on Jake to help me build an LLC. And then I leaned on the resources at one of our local areas, Radius, to sort of build out the rest of the infrastructure that was going to make my startup. So I leaned on them for a CPA, for marketing. I got a guy to instantly come out. It's like, I need branding. Help me build my logos. Help me get my website up. And I was super happy within 2 weeks to write an email back to Stanley Black & Decker and say, yeah, I got 2 domain names. I got 2 full sort of marketing packets, and I have my website up. And, stuff that we weren't able to succeed at in 6 months as an entrepreneurial startup in a large business. When you took off those breaks of having to deal with that sort of business atmosphere, we were able to do it in a couple of weeks. I think I said, I might not have said, I'm in my 3rd year. I am just starting to, I've gone from having a couple of employees and outsourcing to totally outsourcing to hitting a point right now where I'm going to start to scale up my business in terms of people. I currently subcontract out about $1 million worth of development work a year to Erie businesses, Whitethorn Digital and others. Ghost Creative is one of my sort of clients / employers also. And then I also obviously bring a lot of people to the area to talk about construction and to talk about how that works. And that, like I said, that changed to the manufacturing mindset.
That was thorough. Thank you. And you stole my thunder on a couple questions, which is fantastic.
Sorry.
No, it's great. Let's talk a little bit about this region. And so what would you say makes this region a good place to start a business like yours? I mean, I know a lot of your work can be done sort of from anywhere, but what about this area do you think is good for small businesses?
Well, I think what we see in this area that's really, really good is it's still an area where you can get affordable housing. It has the infrastructure you need to do most digital and technology work. And I've been shocked and amazed at the resources and how quickly they can be made available to you as a startup. The resources here, and I'm using Radius as the example because that's a big part of my experience of having a business in Erie, is because I could go within a day and get a CPA that can start to help me out, along with a lawyer, along with everything else. And we have a good, solid community of startups that work with each other and sort of expand each other's business. Surprisingly enough, this morning, I was trying to bring on just a general assistant. I'm like, I need extra help. And I put out a Slack saying, hey, this is what I need. If you're another startup, I'm happy to have you as somebody who's working on their own business and can also help me. And instantly got back a person that is probably going to be the person I hire, a really good fit. And, if you're in a major market and you're trying to say, I would like an assistant, that's a couple month proposition. And it's going to be hard to find an assistant for an unstructured business. A lot of startups, we don't have the structure that you would see in a larger business. It's tough for us to offer benefits. It's tough for us to offer real clear growth potential. Like, hey, when you start with me, you're going to end up being this, this, and this. It's more of a, are you willing to share this dream with me as I build it out? But this area, again, the price of living, the number of people that want to stay in the area. A lot of times I feel like it's for other reasons. I feel like it's, they have family here, they have all of these things, but these people are looking for good work. And so we almost have our own little employment area, especially in the startup market, that has some people that you can get to. To this day, I keep moving through developers. And we're at this point plucking them straight out of schools. We pluck them out of Penn State, we pluck them out of Gannon, we plug them out. We grab those developers early on, and they're still really good for startup work. You get a low cost of entry, which you really need. We need some people that are willing to not aim at the moon when they're coming out of school. And if they want to stay in the area, you have some people that are really going to be loyal to good jobs, because finding a good job in the area can be somewhat difficult. And in other areas with the larger markets, it's just the difficulty is not there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. And is that the method that you've been using for finding people to work with you all along? Is like I'm going to reach out to, this networking group, or do you do some kind of hand picking? You find people who will send people to you. What do you think?
Well, for my particular business, there's a level of, to be a consultant at the level that I am, you have to have 20 years experience in the industry, and you have to have a lot of connections within the industry. If you're not well connected at the levels of working with some of these major organizations, you don't have a lot of traction as a consultant. So to find them, I actually use LinkedIn. And so you guys know, as a startup, I target people I want, and I just stick with it. I don't go out there and give a general ad or a general like, hey, I might like to have someone that does these things. I find somebody that does something that I think is what I need to do in my business, and I pull up next to as many of those people as I can. And I hate to say this, I wait until I feel like they are looking to move to do something more challenging or something closer to what I want to do. And I'm there to say, hey, would you like to come on board with me? And would you like to try this? And, with a startup, again, can't offer the level of sort of the level of insurance, the level of some of these resources I don't have yet. I can't offer good pay, which is good, but I also very unstructured. So you're looking for people that have an entrepreneurial spirit. And I always ask people when I bring them on, like, what their hobbies are, because if their hobbies don't align with what they're doing in an entrepreneurial startup, you have to kind of live with your product. You're really committed to that product 100% of the time to make it successful, at least in the early stages, right? So you need people that have a passion that at least aligns with that. So you can say, okay, I think this might be more than a job for them. This might be something that they really have a determination to do well in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a common theme for a lot of entrepreneurs that I see. A lot of it is about the attitude and the willingness to take some risks, and that includes the people that work for those startups. Are you willing to have passion for it, take some risks, even with some of your finances for a while? You mentioned grabbing students out of colleges, and I've seen that as well. As college students are willing to take risks, it's not going to cost them very much if they spend 2 years on something that doesn't work. And I think they are. Do you get the same experience from them? Do you think that they're, willing to take those risks more than people who have been around for a while, or what do you think?
I couldn't agree more with their risk ability. I would add this from a purely mercenary standpoint. If you're a startup out there, they also are usually under 24, which means they're on their parents' insurance, which means if you have had trouble as a business getting your insurance fixed up, they're going to give you at least 3 to 6 months to figure that stuff out, which is helpful for people like me as we start to bring on these people. So like there are a lot of really positives with the college. Another thing I would say is their existing relationships back with their cohort in that college offer you expertise that you might not get outside of pulling people out of a college. When I pulled somebody out of, I pulled someone out of Penn State for disclosure. I pulled Eli out of the Innovation Lab. His connections within that lab informed the way that I could build moving forward. They build cohorts as they're in this college environment that first are going to give you access to new employees, but also are going to give you access to knowledge and understanding from people that are in the middle of their educational journey. And there are aspects, especially in technology, maybe not so much in other industries, but in technology, having aspects of or having the ability to reach back into that experience set that those people are learning, it really pays dividends. If I want to know something about a technology that's just come in, usually the education is providing some level of understanding there. So I can reach into that and kind of say, all right, you're going to help here with your 9 to 5, but your buddy is going to help make me understand how this technology works, particularly like with some of the new manufacturing stuff. The additive, the kids coming out of school know more about additive than people working in additive. I'm just telling you. I was with Stanley Black & Decker standing in front of their 16 different, metal 3D printers. And I guarantee you most of the students that are printing on Penn State have a better understanding of the scope of what's going on in that field. Like maybe the DeWalt Stanley people really understood that printer, but like the people from college, they understand like the entire scope of what's going on in that technological movement, which is super compelling as a reason to really look to hire at least a couple of them. I hate to say to bring you into the modern age, but that's not really what it is. It's to get connected with the education that's going on and with those professors within the different colleges.
We've got a question from the viewers, and I'm going to pass this on. And this individual actually has their own startup as well. And it just went away. And
it's unanswered.
I got it. I found it. Starting a business allows the founders to paint a mental roadmap. And what I have found is that the startup journey often goes off-road. When you started your business, what surprises took you off-road, and how did you manage those unplanned changes?
That's a cool question, and I couldn't agree more. I really go, okay, so I'm going to recommend a book, but I don't like the author, which is weird. Like the author in my mind is probably a jerk, but the book's really good, and it's called Anti-Fragile. And what he sets up is what he calls the barbell system of options. So, and this is the way that my startup has kind of worked, is there's always been something on one end of the barbell that is a steady form of income that can keep me floating as my startup. And then there's on the other end is all of my options. So optionality. And I think that's what you're talking about with the off the road. So I'm always looking to go off road. I'm always looking at the options on the far end, but I always do have that stable side of the barbell that says, okay, these are my core clients. This is my core functions. And the options are just what I can get at. And the biggest option is horribly hilarious. We're in the middle of COVID, right? So Matthew White over at Whitethorn doesn't have as much work as he might have normally. He walks over and Jacob had introduced us at some point, and he says, you got any work? And I'm like, yeah, actually I do. I got this little teeny project. Can you take it? So he takes this little teeny project, and we kind of start to build up this sort of understanding of, oh, wow, I can do software development by using your group as my manpower. So I get this other client that I'm working with on something else, a fab shop actually, and they said that they wanted this software. And so I'm like, hey, I kind of have a good idea for how that should work based on my experience as sort of a subject matter expert. And I talked to the guy, and he's like, I can't do it inside my development group because my development group is full up. So there's this company, all of their developers full up on a major product that's already got great traction. They want to build this other product, and it's like, all right, we're going to do parallel development. That's a word that I made up. And it's going to be with Whitethorn. And parallel development, which means going up to a company, it's very much like that entrepreneurial thing. I move up beside a company that's already got processes, that's already got a focus for their development, and I develop something on the side that they want along with them. So in collaboration with them, I'm developing a product. That's my biggest off-road, because it's become a primary road for my business. Like, if you look at what I actually make money on, I actually make money on a lot of subject matter / product development that goes parallel to existing projects. Like, it really is a neat thing. And it was definitely an off-road. The other off-road that I've run into is I did some podcasts to get my name out there, and then all of them did really well. And so, like, now I have an entire speaking and podcast area that's pretty robust within my business. Like, I would feel it if it fell out, but it was totally unplanned. It was just a matter of, you're trying to do one thing. And again, that optionality is there. And because I have something that's an anchor job, or a couple jobs that are anchor jobs at this point, I can go and play with those options with the extra time that I have. And that optionality becomes sort of my feeder for expanding my business I've just reached the point in my business where I'm starting to sort of buckle down. I'm starting to scale the manpower to deal with all of these different sort of verticals that arise when you look at going off-road. I'd be curious to know where you went off-road, but
So tell me this. I asked this knowing you a bit, so it's a little targeted, but a lot, I see this with a number of founders, of not all of them, of course, but a good number of them will start the business on their own and overwhelm themselves entirely, but they have trouble sharing that work with other people. They have trouble hiring and delegating work to other people. Because they own that work and they're very good at it, and they know that they're the best person they know at what they're doing. Did you have any experience like that? And like what advice would you give to someone who is just having trouble delegating some of their baby to other people who are helping them?
I had kind of a joint experience there. So when I was at William T. Spader Company, I was actively their CTO, but I was also actively the head of the modeling, or the digital modeling of buildings. All right. So I worked with a staff there of a lot of people, and I got very used to delegating within that environment and on that subject matter. All right. So what I thought was interesting is when I moved out on my own to be a startup, exactly what you said happened. I had a different subject matter that I was dealing with the consulting, with the fab shops, with all of those things. Had an amazingly hard time handing that off to anybody, and had a hard time communicating properly where I thought it should go, because so much of it wasn't mapped out. And I sat down with a guy named Jon Marsh. He's a local. He was at Decision Associates, and we're having noodles down at the cafe. And he's like, Jonathan, you're a really good process person, and you're teaching people how to build processes, but you don't build processes for your own business very well. And he says, while you're doing all your other things, be taking notes, be building out a system, a written, visible system. And the reason it needs to be written and visible is you need to show it to other people to get it critiqued. And that allowed me to better give away my ideas. So now when I'm bringing someone on, not only do I have like a diagram that shows them where they fit into my ideas and what they should do, but it really helped me build structure to my business. One of the warnings I would give, remember to be, when you're in the startup mode, which is a wicked learning environment, which means there's a lot of stuff that changes every day, and it has its own profile as a learning environment. Really, there's a good book called Range to read on that. But when you're in the startup mode, be descriptive when you build diagrams, not proscriptive. One of the things that happens is a lot of startup people are ultra micromanagers. So they like to be prescriptive when they give advice. They like to be really prescribed. Do this way at this time. That is great, except it's going to have the people put their blinders on, And you are an entrepreneurial person, so you actually don't want them to do that. You want them to be able to see. So you should be very descriptive. When you're giving somebody a task, be descriptive about what it is, but don't prescribe how to do it. You can if they run into problems, but as much as possible at the beginning, be descriptive versus proscriptive, because the environment in which they are learning to be your employee is different. And read about wicked and kind environments. There's a really good book on it called Range. It's a really good thing. If you're a manufacturer, you have a kind environment in your shop that's becoming more kind as you go. If you're a fixed location manufacturer, you have a wicked environment. So good luck making anything that is really normal and proscriptive work. You're going to have to be descriptive, and your people are going to be a lot more dynamic.
That I will second that entirely. So I didn't introduce myself very much, but for those of you who don't know, I run the Beehive site at Behrend, and we do product development, rapid prototyping, app design, and some data analytics, and all engineering associated work. And I often prefer to tell my employees, who are all students, these are all undergraduate students, I need you to do this thing, or I need you to improve this process, but I don't tell them how I want it done, because they're going to give me a better idea than I had often. It's been frequent that they will be the ones who come to me and say, we need to fix this. And I'll say, okay, how do you want to fix this? So it provides a lot of opportunity for them to gain confidence too, because I don't think it particularly at their age, they often get the opportunity to make decisions that affect other people and businesses and how they're run. And I don't think that they realize that in ordinary businesses, that happens a lot, where the individual worker can have the power to change a policy within even a huge company. Now, they're not always enabled to do that in every case with companies. And we know there are examples where it doesn't happen. But I think that employers are looking for that more often now too. I work with a lot of manufacturers, and I see that they want innovation in their own company, and they don't always see it happen on its own. A lot of it is that the company is so comfortable in their place and they're doing their thing that they do really well, that they don't think that there's any room for improvement, or they might not really say that out loud, but that it might be in the back of their head. And they are looking for ways to open the door to give their employees more of an opportunity to step up and suggest changes that are going to make the company better.
I love that leadership style too. I'll tell you that the challenge versus the ask. So like, hey, I need to get this done. And sort of framing it as a challenge for them to go out and do things really is a different mindset than go do these things. Go do these things, you go do them, and then you come back and get your money, right? That's what you do as an employee. And manufacturing actually falls into this all the time. Manufacturing, one of the tough things about innovation, and I've learned this from talking to others, and I see it in construction sort of on the flip side, is you're having people do prescribed tasks all day, and they're very repetitive. And because of that repetition, there's that tendency to rut. You're going to get into a rut where if they're given a challenge of any type, there's no system or repetitive sort of pattern for them to fall into instantly. And you get a lot better innovative thought. Like it becomes an innovative experience at the point when they're challenged. Sometimes the challenge also, like, because we do fab shops, which are basically offsite manufacturing locations, process manufacturing locations. But what we often do is walk up to those people and we're like, hey, listen, we really need to cut the time in this area, rather than come up to them with a bunch of ideas on how to cut that time, because those people work that. And if you believe in lean or Toyota way or any of those things, you're going to know that the best place to find innovation at that level of detail, at that process, or sorry, at the procedural level, is to talk to those people that are actually doing the procedures and give them a challenge like, can you cut 5 minutes? I just need 5 minutes. I just need 3 minutes. Because now they're thinking about what they're doing again. And once they start thinking about what they're doing again, it really changes the game. I also do, this is funny, Jake, and it does tie into that. So when I set up stations within manufacturing space, I have them run it against no product for a while. Like, do not make this part of actual production, because I've noticed that people, when they don't have fixed production outcomes, think about their game. It's like learning basketball. Like, you don't go out there and learn basketball by playing a bunch of games with other people alone. You train on the individual skills and the individual processes that go into basketball, and then you play. But I wouldn't say, I'd like you to get better at 3-point shots. So we're going to play these other 3 teams 5 times. And I just want you to think about how to get better at those shots. You go practice your 3-point shot, then we'll go play. And I think it takes them out of that game time when they're supposed to produce product and puts them into the mindset of practice time, where they're thinking about, how do I cut a minute off this? What is the best way for me to move when I'm moving through this assembly station, or when I'm dealing with this process station? It really does change their mindset. And we've seen it again and again in construction. The biggest way to get innovation, we found, is to take guys that are in this field, which is this horribly wicked environment where things are changing all the time and the scope's always wrong and the feedback sucks. Like, you don't have no idea how things work. These are super innovative people, because all their day is sort of dealing with problems, and they're always kind of having to deal with it in that horrible outdoor snowing environment. Like, putting together a pipe in a shop is one thing, but putting together it in the ice, snow, rain while somebody's standing over you, something's smoking, you have to wear extra head masks. It's all of these things lead for them to really engage mentally and really start bringing innovation to what they do.
That's really interesting. We have another question from the viewers. The question is, most startups have 1 to 10 company advisors, but I'm finding that founders find maybe 1 or 0 of those mentors. And that mentor makes the largest impact on the founder when advice is given. Have you found, do you have a mentor? Do you mentor anyone? Have you found any kind of dynamic like that?
Well, it's kind of a cheat because I'm a consultant, right? So I build peer groups for people all the time, and I build mentoring groups. We actually have at one of the organizations I'm working with, National Electrical Contractors, we have an Innovation Institute, which is just setting up younger people with mentors and with a peer group so that they can learn. Individually, I have 3 major mentors. One of them is business mentor, Jon Marsh over at Decision Associates. He actually probably, like, I could probably put a lot of my success at his feet, just because he was able to take somebody who's very good at technical proficiencies and teach them how the boardroom works and sort of how that dynamic works and how to communicate better within it. And that was pivotal to what I was doing. My other mentor was when I was at William T. Spader Company, Tim Devine, who had worked in the field. So here's a guy that every day is spent producing. And then Jon Marsh is a guy that spends every day thinking about how to steer the ship. And because I'm a startup, I went to San Francisco to work with Mach 49, which trains startup companies to be in design thinking and in ideation, and honestly in execution too. And San Francisco, by the way, just has a bunch of mentors anyways. But I went there with a guy named Jake Olson, who has built 2 startups, software and hardware, just a real good leader. He's been the guy that I tend to bounce most of the ideas off as I go. So as I'm growing, I'm on the phone with him all the time going, hey, what do you think of this? How do you think I should structure this? And it's grown from there. I probably do have 10 ongoing mentors in peer groups. And I guarantee you, because I kind of keep track of them, I have about 20 people that mentor under me within the industry, whether that are not clients. So I have clients that obviously pay to do things like that, but I have other people where it's just like, I'm making an investment because I can see, the impact that Tim Devine, Terry Spader, like all these people had on me. The last thing I would say, and this might be only in contracting, is we went to a convention when I was at Spader before I became a startup. And this guy said, why don't you come to our shop and see how we do things? He taught us what co-opetition was. He really doubled down on somebody who's a competitor, but who realizes that they need to bring the level of understanding up within the industry as a whole, or they feel personally compelled to do it. They laid out they laid out a plan that allowed me to bring Spader's VDC group, which is virtual design and construction, the digital modelers within construction, from more of a local presence to, at the end of the day, we were like a national level of performance because those peer groups are out there. I would say I think what I'm saying there is go to conventions. If you're looking for mentors, there's a lot of people there who are like me that are like, hey, I was mentored. I want to mentor others because I feel like I owe something back. But yeah, I probably have 10. And I do check with them always. I was on the phone with one this morning.
That's great. Tell us about something that went horribly wrong. I mean, give us an example of something, an obstacle that was in your way or a decision that was a bad decision, and how you moved on from, how you resolved that, and what you learned.
So when I first left Stanley Black & Decker, obviously I left with some clients. But I also, those clients wouldn't make a business. They weren't enough to make a business. And so I had this skill, a fallback skill, which was virtual design and construction, literally modeling in 3D buildings and other things. And I'm really good at it. I'm really fast. And I said, you know what? I'm just going to do this as that one, like I said, the barbell, as that steady work. And it was the biggest mistake that I've ever made in my business. And I started to build out a business around doing this skill that I was really good at. And I think that was the takeaway, is just because you are personally good at executing on something doesn't mean that should be your business. Like, you need to look at the business model that exists. That particular business model had a really high level of risk. It was high paid, but it had amazingly short deadlines. And if you couldn't control the means of manufacturing, it was likely that you were going to produce plans, digital plans and models that weren't going to be manufacturable. And I mitigated that a little bit. I was at the time I took on Universal Epic Studios theme park in Orlando. So I'm drawing in my digital model other people's art models. So I'm like, no one's going to have to manufacture this. I don't feel bad about the risk. I hired on some people to do that. I bought the technology to do that. I have a $50,000 to $70,000 investment in building out that piece. And at a point about 1 year into my business, I said, I'm never doing this again. This was only done because I happen to be good at that thing. And it's while it could have been a great business, and people do have great businesses doing that, I deal with them all the time, I realized it wasn't the right business for me. It's not where my passion was, and it's not where I wanted to end up. So I think my biggest mistakes were, again, taking a personal thing that I just happened to be really good at and thinking I'm going to build a business around this, instead of thinking in a bigger, and it was a niche thing. You know, I was a technician trying to make a technician into a startup. And that's, I don't want to say that's unlikely to work, because I'm sure it will work for somebody. For me, that was not, I was ready to move on. And that was not what I wanted to do, was just recreate my previous job.
That's interesting, because that's the common way to, even when I'm thinking about, you know, what do I want to do? What do I want to focus on? We often choose things that we are just extremely good at. And then that's not necessarily the best way to start a small business. I mean, it's not necessarily the best way to choose what you're going to do next, or what kind of service you're going to offer for the community. Sometimes it is, but you've got I am a strong proponent of passion within the startup industry. I think that a person's tenacity, their willingness to take failures and build upon them instead of, I mean, not build upon them to make them worse, build upon what they learned from failure, and be willing to, you know, go ahead and dump something that is not working, even if it's been expensive.
Yeah.
I think everyone's ability to dump something that isn't working is super important. Tell us, go ahead.
I've just one thing to add there in terms of like passion. One of the reasons that I was able to dump that is I did go to that Mach 49 thing in San Francisco, and it was focused on design thinking. And I thought to myself, I don't have to be responsible for all the good ideas here. I can, you know, there are some systematic ways for me to go. And I don't believe in design thinking as the way a startup should start necessarily. I know they do in San Francisco, and obviously they're really really good at it. So maybe I'm wrong, but it was really for me a way to see, okay, I can walk into a room and implement a process that's going to allow me to really see with a bunch of other people, what are the ideas that are likely to catch fire? And is VDC and BIM the idea? No, well, it wasn't. So it gave me the freedom to step away and say, I don't have to have all the ideas. They don't have to be just mine. I can take this wider survey of what can be good to build a startup off of.
Mhm. Another good question from the viewers. You obviously have a lot of energy and you're passionate about your work. We all know that energy comes at a cost. How do you recharge? How do you when things get really rough? I mean, entrepreneurs typically they're spending all their hours. Often entrepreneurs spending all their hours. But not unusual for them to work 80 hours a week, 100 hours a week on their startup. And that can burn people out really fast. And that can be totally destructive to a startup. What do you do to recharge? What do you do to take your mind off of, or to, fill that battery back up?
So I collect hobbies. I really collect hobbies. I mean, it sounds weird, but like, seriously, if you want to go to erieforage.com and you'll see mushroom foraging and blacksmithing and making solar dehydrators for your garden. And, oh, well, this day I went into my shop. And so I was somebody who always liked building things. And the most frustrating thing for me about a startup, the thing that really takes my gas is, first, I am a professional person and I do like talking to people, but I do need to recharge. I'm somewhat of an introvert. I mean, I'm like borderline, I'm recovering introvert. I think I've recovered at this point pretty much, but being a builder, it allowed me to have something that I could look at the end of the day. Like when I build, like that knife beside me, I built that knife out of Damascus steel. All right. It's a long process, but I get an outcome at the end that's very, very fixed and real. And that type of stuff recharges me. So usually it's going out and building something that I can complete, because I'm building a bunch of stuff that stops short within my startup. Nothing's really completed in my startup on a cadence that allows me to recharge. Lately I've been weightlifting for like the last 6 months, which has been really helpful. I will say, when I started my startup, I started to put on weight and grab a bunch of bad habits. Part of that's COVID, but about a year ago, a little more than a year and a month ago, one of the guys that I did this with sent me a thing called Juggernaut AI, artificial intelligence app for weightlifting. And I'm obsessed with apps anyway. So I'm like, oh yeah, we got to see if this actually works. And it worked really well. And now weightlifting has become something that I do that allows me to offload some of that. I would say though that I am not the master at doing that. Jake will readily admit. I completely gas on a regular basis. And I also overwork on a regular basis. Usually the hint is like when I leave my keys in the refrigerator and can't find them, and my wife walks up and like, you have no idea where anything in your life is. And I'm like, yeah. She's like, you need to take a break. And the best way for me to take a break is to go build something that I can finish building, work with my kids on something they're building, or go fishing or something like that. But primarily having something that has a completion to it. I always kind of wondered about video games, because they don't actually complete, whether or not they'd be able to give me that feel, but I don't know that they would. It would be weird, but that's what I do right now, is I try to find something I can actually complete that I'll look at the end and go, yeah, that's awesome.
That's awesome. Good answer. Let's talk, coming back to the sort of Northwest Pennsylvania and the surrounding region. What do you think is missing? Where's there a gap for people like yourself, other startups? Where is there like a hole that is gaping that you see that, because I mean, the beehives, we are dedicated to trying to fill in those gaps. That's like our purpose, is to find barriers that get in the way of your success and success of other startup owners, and trying to fill those with services that are free or approachable at least. What is something that you see that this city, this region, including all the rural areas, what's missing?
Do you like, I said that I came at startup in the backwards manner where it's like I had a bunch of clients and I'm trying to build the startup really fast. And what I realized when I'm trying to build this startup really fast is that there's not a good roadmap for how to get the legal and the functional parts of a business started quickly. I mean, they were there, and it might not be me just not seeing them, but like I had a hard time opening a bank account and understanding what I needed to open a bank account. Real simple form would have told me what to do, but those aren't organized in a way. It's almost like I would love to see some guidance where it's like, your idea took off. Here's what you need to do to get your LLC and start going. Also, I feel like there's an area in there where you're like building this, where you're making a lot of, I mean, I think startup people are pathologically optimistic. We're all pathologically optimistic. That's why we thought we could do this to begin with, right? So we'll make a bunch of impulsive decisions as we're building our business. And if you have to build it fast, I would have loved to really had thought put into whether or not I should be a C Corp or LLC or LLC as S Corp or some of those structures, to make those structures more transparent to the people in startup and saying, here's one that's going to scale really well. Like, good example, I'm an LLC. So if I want to do shares, it's very difficult to do shares as an LLC. They're not real shares. You can do it, but they're not the same thing as giving points on a product. So if I'm a developer and I want to give out points to my employees, it would be better for me to be a full-blown corporation. It's going to cost me a little more money at the beginning. But when I build out that infrastructure to sort of give away parts of my business as incentives, it's going to be there. Or I realize now that ultimately I want to be an employee-owned business at some level as I scale up. I would like some help knowing what are the right steps to make at the beginning. So you know what it sounds like, Jake? It sounds like if you're a programmer, or if any of you guys are listening, there's this term called technical debt, and it's you're moving so fast in development that you're making short-term decisions because of necessity that are going to bite you in the long term. I would really love some more help on making the right long-term decisions in that short period of time where you're building out the functional parts of your business. I actually, to tell you the truth, I still don't have a line of credit on my business. I got to the point where I didn't need it really, really quick, but like finding a line of credit, finding a credit card was hilarious when you're trying to build like, and it was like there, well, you don't have the money, but you do need ways to do transactions. So there's a lot of that I think could be really systematized. I think you could have a method of assessing, especially if we got together like a core group of startup people who have been successful, say, we're going to sit down and just assess your business and say, yeah, you should be this type of corporation, or you should be this type of grouping. And, you should go to this type of CPA versus this, because you don't need to do payroll in the same way. I'm a consultant. I don't need to deal with sales tax in the same way other people do. So like, I don't need that piece, but really helping people make those assessments that they've never had to think about at that early stage would be helpful. And it might be in the area and I just don't know it, but being at Radius, I got like, you have all of those people helping you figure out how to do this stuff. And that was the one part I thought was missing, is like, man, I would have loved a better roadmap. And I tried online, and I'm good at online, and I still couldn't. There's so many, it was like overabundance of answers,
Well, that's great. That's great information. I mean, and even if services like that exist, if you don't know about them, that's a flaw. That's a gap.
Yep.
So some elements of those services you can get here, but if you couldn't find them when you were looking, that's a problem. So that's great feedback. Tell me something about, well, we got about 10 minutes left. Tell me something about something that went really well for you. What are you proud of? What was a good decision that really was a defining moment for you? Something that really made it take off.
I'm going to tell you that it was actually that conversation with Matthew White about that little app really led to a part of the business that wouldn't be there. And it has been more and more and more successful as I've learned from the people around me how to do product management for software better, and and mapping. So like the things like that have really like elevated the business have been the idea of really understanding how far you can get with partnerships. And I do think, again, I think that's part of being part of a startup community and not being a startup trying to go on your own, is you don't need to have all of these things and still be really successful. I think that was the biggest thing, is just realizing you can start a development wing to your company. You can outsource what you need to do to get it done. And it can be very, very, very lucrative and successful. I don't know. I think it's been more successful than lucrative. Like the ideas have come out better than I've been able to pull off the money part. But they've all been good, and it's been a good ride. I mean, I will tell you right now for sure, going into the new year, I am about to scale up my business. I am doing so from a situation where I have enough money to hire the people I want to hire, without worrying about my expenses as an individual. I have enough structure built that anybody that comes on is going to have somewhere where it's really understandable where they're going to be used. So I think the other success was not scaling before I was ready. If I had tried to scale before this, I would have crashed and burned. I still may, and you can talk to me in 6 months and we'll find out. But like, I think that was I think that was one of my major successes, was just realizing that once you build this structure. So I built a structure for consulting, actually, that's going to end up going into an app so I can scale it even bigger. So because I built a structure for my business, I now have a structure that works really well as a program too. So now I can scale consulting to get to people that are never going to be able to afford a luxury consultant, which I kind of qualify as at this point.
That's pretty cool. So you said it a couple times, work with people around you, don't go it alone, learn from other people. I think that's true. I think even those people who think that they're doing it all on their own, the self-made entrepreneur, it's an illusion. I think that, they're not necessarily their own boss. Their customers, their boss, or their board is their boss, or their shareholders, or the community they live in. And if they think they're really going it alone, they're not. They're using all these other people and their ideas and their thoughts and what they've learned from them. And so I love that community spirit. I think that Erie's got a good community that's been built, over the years, and it's great to hear that as well. So outside of that, working with others, do you have any advice for someone who's thinking about starting something? So if they're not there, if they're like, I got this idea and it looks good, and when can I get started? Should I start? What do you think? What's good things for them to consider?
What's good things for them to consider? The conventional thing for you to consider is for you to figure out how much money that product is going to make, and all of these other things. What I think is really important for you to consider is what's your pain threshold? And that pain threshold is really important. What is my pain threshold in terms of making it to the end of starting a business? And then find a couple people to sit down and again, give you their story of their startup and see if that pain threshold that you have is going to match up. Because the people that I see fail, they don't fail, they quit. The great thing about being in this area is we have these programs like KIZ that are going to back you up. They're going to allow you to make some big mistakes and still recover your business. These are areas that are going to give you funding, or going to give you advice and everything else. So I think what you need to decide before you start down that road, what's my pain threshold? How much am I willing to put up with? And make sure that aligns with what you've decided to do. If you're going to go into consulting, it's real easy. But if you're going to go into building out a manufacturing line, what's going to keep someone else from doing that as fast as me? Am I going to be hurt when this doesn't work the way I want? Like, what are you willing to endure? Because a lot of this comes down to grit. Like Sean Fedorko, who runs Radius, made some sort of sideways comment to me at the beginning. He says, I always know the ones that are going to succeed because they're here before I get here and they leave after I leave. And that's part of that pain threshold. Is there's a time in your startup when you're going to have to do that. It's just going to happen unless you were like in, the unicorn, and that doesn't happen very long. Statistically, you're going to be spending your evenings, weekends, nights at this. Are you willing to do that? Because if you're not don't get started. Wait until you're mature enough in your idea and in your desire for that idea to do it. But like, that was the big one for me, is like, I reached the point where somebody else kind of made that decision for me, where Stanley was like, oh, I just walked into a bad job. So now my ability to endure pain was, would I rather endure pain over here at Stanley, or would I rather go build my own thing? And so it made that decision easier for me. You know, what you're doing now, think about how much you enjoy that. Think about what, if it's worth giving that up and taking that risk. Also, if you're doing something that you hate doing, don't necessarily go to your idea because of that. There are other jobs out there that you won't hate doing. So make sure you want to do your idea. That's important too. I see people that are like, I'm going to do my startup because I lost my job. That's not a startup. That's intermediate employment. You know, you really got to be willing. Like, I regularly turn down job offers as a consultant that are way more than I'm going to make this year as a company, like twice, 3 times. So like, that's my level of pain. I'm going to endure this because I want to own this company. I want to own this idea. I want to help my industry in these certain ways, or I actually want to help my industry more than anything else. But like, I have some goals that are fixed that go outside of money. Because when you start to do your business, the other thing that's going to happen is someone's going to offer to buy it too early, or to buy your idea out from under you, or somebody that's building that idea in an existing environment where they already have a company is going to say, wow, you're super valuable to us now. So you're not going to finish off that business because you're going to go take that job. Make sure you're willing to endure that. What I think Elon Musk was like one of the big ones, like, you have to have the thick skin. And the thick skin is what allows you to do these ideas that everybody says are going to fail. Also, if a bunch of people say your idea is not going to work, that does not mean your idea is not going to work. Like just as a general rule, almost every entrepreneur I know has had 20 to 30 people tell them the idea is not going to work. These are the successful ones too. And it's just so make sure you have confidence in your idea. You're willing to endure that pain. And I think you're going to do good. You're going to do well.
Thank you, John. That's great advice. Kathy, are you returning to see us out?
I totally can. So interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us, John. Absolutely.
Thanks for having me, Kathy.
Yeah,
It's
for
really
sure.
fun to talk.
Yeah, well, you know, I think what you shared with everyone, hopefully will resonate, and, you know, they will know that they're not alone with some of the struggles that you had. And, you know, hopefully one day they'll be on here sharing their successes as well. So thank you so much for that. I will be uploading the recording of this tomorrow on YouTube, and it will be on the Northwest PA Innovation Beehive Network channel as well. So if you need to watch it again with some popcorn, it will be available tomorrow. So thank you very much, John, for your time. Thank you very much, Jake, for moderating, and everyone have a great evening and safe travels because of all the snow we're supposed to get. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.